Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. My guest today, Rebecca Burrows, is the General Manager of DoorDash Australia. Her leadership has seen the business employ a sports-focused approach to develop a diversified audience and grow brand awareness and engagement, working with the NBL, Touch Football Australia, and having maintained their official partnership with the NRL. Previously having maintained leadership positions at Australia Post, as General Manager of Small Business, and as the strategic pricing lead at Shell, Rebecca has a customer-centric outlook and is focused on the performance of small businesses. Folks, so that we can keep running the show, Access Collins has sponsored this episode. Their revolutionary booking and inquiry management software for hospitality is designed to help operators increase foot traffic, maximize revenue, and tackle no-shows. And they're doing that. The average user on their platform sees 18% more web bookings, an increase of 25% on inquiry conversion rates, and up to 900 hours saved in admin each year through automation. If that might help you too, check them out at bit.ly/hosposponsor. Hello and welcome to the show, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to have you on today. I'm really excited to hear about DoorDash and what you guys have been up to and where you're going, your personal journey. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Rebecca, as you know, the first question that I like to ask on the show is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love for you to elaborate on your story and what you've brought to the show today.
Absolutely. I mean, I have so many amazing hospitality experiences that I've had as a consumer. I guess one of the reasons that I love working at DoorDash is that I love the industry of hospitality and experiencing all different moments there. So I've got some consumer ones, but if I think about a pretty crazy moment in our business relating to hospitality, it was probably back at the commencement of all the global lockdowns, and DoorDash announced a cut to our commissions. And at the same time that we were announcing that, obviously, various things were happening around the world, including in the Philippines, Manila going into martial law, and Manila's where a lot of our team that actually upload menus and so forth are based. And so these two things came together. And what happened is we had literally hundreds of thousands of restaurants in the US, in Canada, and in Australia looking to come onto the platform over like a 24 to 48 hour period at the same time that we couldn't access our teams to actually onboard them. And so every single person in DoorDash, from our founder and CEO, Tony, through the whole organization, spent 24 hours around the clock manually loading menus from restaurants in every single geography. And I saw that as a really crazy and inspiring moment, I guess, partly around like kind of the grit and determination of the teams across DoorDash and really getting back to the fundamentals, but also the way all the restaurants that we were working with were able to so quickly kind of like pivot and give us the information they needed and then see what we were doing in the background to get them stood up on the platform whilst they needed to do similar things. And I just thought this is like a crazy moment in time for the world and our business and those hundreds of thousands of businesses that really allowed everyone to kind of keep going. So a pretty incredible moment.
Absolutely. Something about that really resonates is the fact that he's physically rolled his, well, not literally or physically, but he's rolled his sleeves up and gotten into it himself. And I think that really does resonate with your staff when you do show that. I can imagine that it would have been a good sign that he's willing to get in there and get things done and the team would follow suit. I can imagine that itself would have helped to inspire and unite the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also talks to, like, there are also some of the most fun moments in businesses like ours. I think people think a lot about the technology and the scale and the new products, which are obviously incredible. But some of the most fun and inspiring moments as a team are when you're sort of like there in the trenches on the front line. So whether it's like loading menus or out dashing or talking with consumers. And so I think that it also really rallied our whole organisation because it sort of got back to the core and fundamentals of what we're here to do. Way back when DoorDash started, I guess that's how probably every menu got loaded by Tony doing that himself, but also then really in a time that was very tumultuous for everybody, you know, our teams included, to be able to kind of go, well, hang on, like this is the fundamentals of what we're here to do. And so don't worry about all of the peripheries around how we're going to scale our tech or how we're going to onboard enough drivers or put in place, you know, all the different policies we needed to. But like, let's actually just do the fundamentals. You call that restaurant, get their menu, upload it yourself, and then move on to the next one. So I think it was also like a pretty fun and inspiring time in difficult circumstances for everybody in the team.
On that, you have mentioned the fundamentals of what you're here to do a couple of times in there. Can you tell me what really sits behind that? Because you talked about some of the technical aspects, but what actually sits behind that conceptually and drives why you do what you do?
Personally, for me, why I'm here in the role that I'm in, you know, there's probably a couple of things. So I'm a good problem solver. I know that. It's what I actually really enjoy. And whether that's like on a very small scale, like sitting down with somebody talking through a problem that they have and helping them come to a resolution, like I get a real buzz out of that. Or like thinking really creatively about larger scale problems and putting my creative energy behind solving those problems. So in any role that I've had in my career, I've sought out a creative pursuit. So I began my career in advertising as an example, but also somewhere where there's like problems to solve. So whether that's taking an older business that has like a lot of infrastructure and thinking how we use that better, which is a lot what I did, you know, at Australia Post, or then here looking at like how do we help businesses to scale. So for me, there's like that element of creative problem solving. And then the other point is I fundamentally like love small business. A theme that's gone through definitely the last couple of chapters of my career has been around empowering and working with small businesses. Whilst I guess I enjoy working in larger businesses myself, but being able to take the infrastructure and the resources and the thinking and the scale of those businesses and help to therefore lift up small businesses is something that I just enjoy. And the reason for that, small businesses power all of our economies. So, you know, in Australia, I think it's like 92% of the economy is actually powered by small businesses. And so that's like an incredible problem to kind of work on, or an incredible surface area to work on. But what I actually really love is like the stories behind it. And I feel like when I can influence a great outcome for a small business, and in this case, in DoorDash, they're small hospitality businesses or scaling hospitality businesses. And they're also the small businesses of the contractors who deliver for DoorDash as dashers. When I can help them to elevate and grow, I'm impacting a business owner and a family and a community in a really positive way. And I just get so much motivation out of that. So I love hearing small business stories. I love thinking about how I can solve a problem for one business that can then scale out to like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of businesses to really create that impact at a community level. And so that's what drew me to DoorDash. The company is founded on the principles of empowering local economies and small businesses. Our founding story is really grounded in small businesses and in hospitality. But then being able to kind of think like how I can have the best impact is to like help find the problems that those small businesses face or the opportunities that they face, and then apply at scale solutions that allow them to kind of lift up and achieve great things and therefore impact families and communities. That's actually what I really love.
What is it that interested you in small business? I'm trying to work out, because you're quite clearly passionate about it and solve it, and you linked there in your answer about solving problems with small businesses. What was it that interested you in working with small businesses? Because obviously DoorDash isn't a small business, but you're having that impact through other small businesses. What is it about those types of businesses that has excited you and gotten you to work with?
I think it's the really human nature. I really admire the risk and the entrepreneurship and the really innately personal nature of people who start and run and work in small businesses. Like it's very personal. And so I find that really inspiring. In various roles that I've had where I've worked with small businesses, like it's the stories behind them that lead to a lot of motivation to want to help. So that's sort of one element. And I think the other piece is they're innately personal and human. And I think that threads through all small business and probably is only magnified when you talk about hospitality businesses, with hospitality being such a human need and driving so much connection. So I guess what I kind of really admire and enjoy about it, solving business problems and commercial problems or operational problems, but creating things that is very much down to a really personal level. And so I've obviously mainly worked in large businesses, and there's lots of things I love about that, and it's a good place for me. But I look at it and go, but I can directly see the link of my work or the work of my team or the things that I'm exposed to impacting a business, and that therefore impacts a person and a family and a community. And that kind of goes through to, if I think about the way I think about problems that we're solving or issues that we're raising or opportunities, I will always ground that in a specific business story. So I'll reach out to talk to, in this case, a restaurant owner who's using one of our products to understand like what worked well and what doesn't work well, like what has been the positive and if there's any, non-positive impacts on their business of actions that we've taken, and what can we do better or what would they like to see more of. And I find those stories add so much value to my thinking and our business than even all of the aggregated data. We're a very data-led business, as most technology companies are. But it's like the anecdotes that come with it where I can say, well, this business owner told me that this was the impact and this is how they're using our product and this is the things that are working and not working and this is how it makes them feel and this is the impact that it therefore has in their business, that I can then kind of take back and go, right, well, if I could solve that problem at scale, that would unlock so much for all of these other businesses. So I think I'm probably really drawn to the emotions and the stories behind small business as much as I am to the kind of like aggregated commercial outcomes that you can drive.
In the space that we're operating in, obviously, we're talking about the world isn't quite as strange as it was now that COVID is well and truly set in and sort of almost feeling like I'm up in Brisbane and it feels like it's declining a little bit. There's no masks, there's people going out again. It feels like things are starting to dissipate and, we are settling on this new normal. I'd like to know your perspective on what really defines hospitality coming from a technological background.
Hospitality at its core is a connection between people. And so, it's probably, I guess, the ultimate way that just humanity interacts with each other. I do think that it's been somewhat changed over the last couple of years, but like we should also keep in perspective that the last couple of years are just a small amount of like such a long history and future of hospitality. So I guess if I kind of think about it, it's hospitality and the hospitality industry is almost like a microscope on just the way that humans like to interact and what we need as social beings. And that can take various forms. So there's obviously the physical acts of hospitality. So having people over to your home or eating and drinking together in a restaurant or a bar. And that's probably the classic definition. But then I think the other piece around hospitality is just like acts of generosity. And what we've sort of seen over the last couple of years, I guess, is a rethinking, like from restaurants who've needed to rethink what hospitality means, but also from consumers around how they can have those connections with people when we're not able to necessarily physically be together. And so I use the example of gifting to people as an example, as an act of hospitality when you couldn't invite someone to your home or go and visit them. So sending them a gift, sending them a message, sending them a card or a greeting, or all the beautiful things we saw with people leaving things at someone's doorstep when they're in isolation and so forth. That's probably like a different way of showing hospitality to what we had traditionally done. And obviously restaurants in the industry have needed to pivot to that as well, which has been where they've lent on services like ours for delivery, or where they've developed new products where you can bring their products into your home via sauces or condiments or various things to extend that hospitality. And I kind of think obviously the last couple of years that's been like all we could do in hospitality. And as I kind of look forward, I guess what I'm already starting to see, but what I think we'll see is that kind of like blended extension of what hospitality means. So yes, none of us, I'm sure, can wait to get back to what is a more normal way of showing hospitality, inviting people to our homes, eating out together in restaurants. And like, I'm more excited than anybody to do that. But I think that what we've now seen is like we'll enter this new phase where some of those things that we've become accustomed to will remain. An example for me would be, personally, we always have a Friday night dinner with our extended family. That's culturally what we do. Through COVID, we weren't able to physically get together. And so we tried lots of different things, having a Zoom meeting and cooking our own food, having a non-Zoom eating on our own in our small families, and then connecting on Zoom later to catch up. And where we sort of landed was that we were able to deliver food to all of our homes, the same meal. And so we were still sharing in a meal together. And sometimes, to be honest, we were all Zoomed out and we just knew we were all eating the same thing and just did our own thing. And sometimes we all wanted to connect on Zoom. And I think that what I've kind of seen there is that then has become more of a habit. So we're now able to share hospitality with people who aren't in the same city as us. So for a family function recently, we were able to have some people together, but we were able to Zoom in and have food delivered to a family that was interstate. And so it's opened up new possibilities for us in terms of hospitality as consumers. And I think it's just shifted our thinking that we can do everything we used to do plus more. And that's what I'm seeing coming through with consumers and also with restaurants themselves. Like lots of those additional services that restaurants started offering still remain and just make up a new part of their business. And that can drive really great commercial outcomes for them. It also is an extension of what their business could be. And they're reacting to how society has in some ways moved forward with additional ways to be hospitable than what we previously had.
To focus on the restaurant side of things, I'm interested in what you've seen when we look at the restaurant business more holistically and their sort of new revenue streams that they've created out of this environment. What have you seen that's really been driving success in those businesses?
There's different restaurants that have had success in different ways. A few trends that I've seen, or like really great successes that I've seen, is viewing, we think of like out of premise, so like delivery as a part of the business and like treating it almost as a separate product offering would be one way to kind of look at it. Has led to some great successes for people, especially now as they're coming out of all the lockdowns. So obviously during lockdowns, it was the major revenue source. And so people were kind of scrambling to make it work. Now, as they look at like, well, how do I blend this as part of my business and make it a really successful part of my business? Some businesses who've had, I guess, what I would call like product extension are still seeing great success from that. So whether that's packaged products that somebody might now buy within the restaurant or might order to have delivered, or, there's some hospitality businesses that are selling those packaged products through other channels like supermarkets and so forth. I think some of those things are here to stay and people are just experiencing that as a different revenue stream. So you go to the restaurant, you have the steak, you buy the sauce to take home so you can make it at home another time. That probably didn't exist as much to the same extent as what we're seeing now. So that sort of like product extension is one. And then seeing delivery as a distinct area of the business that can actually be a different revenue stream. And so we're seeing a range of things. We're seeing some restaurants who have a dedicated space in their store or their kitchen that is for delivered food. We're seeing some people who've got other premises where they prepare prior to taking some of the prepared food into the restaurant, or quite frankly, facilities just for delivery. And they're choosing to maintain that because it's a different customer segment that they're accessing. And so it's revenue on top of what they're doing in store or in their restaurant. And also with the current kind of staffing challenges that businesses are having, this is a different way to create revenue. So being able to have delivery in off-peak times or in times when you don't have enough wait staff, or as that kind of additional piece that doesn't require as much staffing in store, people are using that to sort of supplement. So I think at the moment we're sort of in a zone where businesses are working out what of the things that we innovated over the last couple of years like actually should be part of just our way of working and we want them to remain, or we might want to change things up a bit, but that now needs to be part of our core. And consumers are equally starting to work through like, what do I want the shape of my life to look like now that we're getting back to something that's not a kind of week by week proposition of what we're allowed to do, but more around what do I want to do. And so working from home consistently offers a great opportunity for hospitality businesses in the suburbs because lunches at home, a coffee nearby, having things delivered to your home when we're all home is much easier. That equally brings, I guess, more opportunity for businesses right in the city in terms of that's becoming a special occasion, or being able to deliver out to those suburbs or to create different product lines. So I think there's also this shift with consumers around getting over the hump of like having to stay home, moving into like the excitement of being out all the time, and now working through, right, what's this right balance that I want to have, and what are the things that are going to make my life better, easier, more fun, more enjoyable that I've gotten used to over the last couple of years.
There's so much that you said that was very interesting. One of those things that resonated with me was around the ways of working in restaurants and considering those resources and thinking about including it in the model to account for if you are understaffed, not just for delivery, but for the fact that you can use these things to make it easier operationally. That really resonated with me there. Just before I do move on to the next question, it's made me think of something else. I'd like to ask you, because you did address, without saying the words, the concept of ghost kitchens. What do you see in this sort of space? Because I have seen some things starting to appear more and more. What do you think the future of that space really looks like?
I'm also like interested in the space. It's not something that I'm like directly engaged with in our business at the moment, but it's something that in talking with different restaurant owners around the role that these ghost kitchens, for want of a better word, can have and how they can best embrace this as a trend. You see it in overseas markets fairly commonly. And so I'm seeing a couple of things. Like I'm seeing some restaurant owners and brands utilizing kitchens off premise to support them in this other stream of their business. So rather than where they might want an in-person dining experience that's, got one, I had an experience and a different one for food that's going to be delivered to someone's home, but still with that same quality. So I'm definitely seeing some restaurateurs using other kitchens to help them to support both sides of their business. And so that's more where it's just really using another premise, but it's the same business operating it. I have seen more spaces where we have, I guess, multiple brands operating out of one kitchen. And, I've seen that both in terms of facilities that have been built especially for that purpose, as well as, some restaurants who've chosen to allow another brand or operate another brand out of their space to help them to offset operating costs or to bring in a different stream. So I think it's really kind of an interesting area to talk to restaurant owners around like why they do use these. And if I was to kind of summarize it, it's either to create a different offering, so utilizing their same skills, team, supply chain, but to create a brand that might have a different space for consumers. And then the other piece would be around creating a more cost-effective way to operate. So rather than utilizing, premium space in the middle of the CBD, which might have quite a limited kitchen space, to be able to use a larger facility for food preparation and sometimes for delivery, sometimes not. And then the other piece would be around shared resource. So, we all know that hospitality has done it so tough over the last few years. And so in some cases, operating or working out of these shared spaces allows brands to share their resources and therefore reduce their operational costs. So there's sort of the trends that I'm seeing in talking to people who are using these spaces, both here in Australia and also globally, around some of the reasons why. I think that a lot of people think these kitchens are used predominantly for pure delivery. And yes, there's definitely some that are used for that. But I found it really interesting talking to a few people who are using these spaces around how they're using it to improve the operations in their dining establishments, or for some of those other products I was talking about, like packaged products that they want to sell, or just to get things kind of prepared and then brought into their other store.
Using that sort of facility as part of the business model for those sorts of businesses, it's not a new thing, moving up the supply chain to do that, and now having the ability to deliver from that space is great. Obviously, another revenue stream to account for. But it's funny because it still sounds sort of dirty to talk about these dark kitchens or ghost kitchens. So I appreciate you sharing some more information about what you're seeing in that world. Thank you for that, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think they sort of get a bad rap. And I wonder if some of it is just because consumers have become so much more aware of these different things that happen within the supply chain. And so therefore, feel like there must be something kind of like more going on there than there is. So, you're right. Like those facilities have been used for a long time for different purposes or similar facilities. And like, yes, now there is delivery run out of that, but that's probably a more operational efficiency than anything else. But I wonder if it's just actually that people are so much more aware that that's kind of how some of these businesses operate, that it's this like brand new thing that should be thought of negatively.
It could very well, and this is purely speculative, but it could very well be the awareness on the food supply chain that has increased and people are wanting to know more about where their food comes from. It could be something as simple as that or complex, depending on the lens you use to analyze that. But to move on, I'd love to ask you, Rebecca, more about your background. You mentioned that you came from advertising. You also mentioned in a previous answer about Australia Post. Tell us what's actually brought you to do what it is that you do with DoorDash.
So, I've had a fairly varied career. As I said, I began my career in advertising and I enjoyed that industry, I guess, for the kind of creativity. It was a pretty fun, fast-paced industry. And so early career spent there. I then went and worked at Shell, which obviously is a very different company to working in advertising and also very different to where I've ended up. But what that really gave me was this love for solving like really big problems. Shell gets a different rap from different stakeholders. It was a company I adored working in. And part of it was it's such a strategic organization. And so working on problems that had global scale or were thinking, 10 years out or more, it gave me a real view of that kind of like big picture thinking. And I worked both here in Australia and also for quite a number of years overseas in global roles. And so that gave me, I guess, a real love for working in large businesses because of the big picture thinking and also the immense talent that you could kind of work with. I came back to Australia and I just had two young kids. I've got two boys, nearly teenagers or teenagers now. But I came back to Australia and the time was right for me to work in a really Australian-based business. I didn't want to be traveling all the time and so forth. And I joined Australia Post at a time that Post was really going through entering e-commerce deliveries. And it seems bizarre now to think about. Back then, Australia Post main parcel business was like consumers sending parcels to consumers. And it was really just the beginnings of e-commerce and online shopping. And I had a lot of different roles there, leading operations, working in sales, working in marketing, working in commercial kind of roles. But the role, I guess, that really grounded me in this love for small business was firstly when I ran what was called the business hubs then, but, the business that looked after small businesses at Post from an operational side. And then when I actually went on to lead the small business segment, which was really thinking about what Australia Post could do to support small e-commerce businesses. And that's probably like the most relevant part to what then landed me at DoorDash, because obviously, working at Post, I've worked in logistics and operations. And so that naturally lends itself to DoorDash. But this love for small business really came from my role leading the small business segment at Post, where I interacted with so many small businesses, including the franchisees who run small businesses within Australia Post. And so I guess then what attracted me to DoorDash was solving a similar challenge in terms of delivering things to Australians as efficiently and effectively and with as much delight for the consumer as possible. So, similar problem solving to what we were doing at Australia Post, but with a totally different context. So a different type of business that we're serving, a technology-rich organisation and infrastructure light, as opposed to, a business with a lot of well-built-out physical infrastructure. And then also, a business going through rapid growth with our customers. And so I was attracted to the problems that were being solved by DoorDash. I was very attracted to the purpose and mission of being a business that is grounded in supporting small businesses and the local economy. And then I just loved the idea of working in a business with the kind of like fast pace and technology bent that we have, which means that we can like innovate very quickly and be really creative. So it's kind of brought together, I guess, the creativity from early in my career, the big picture thinking that I developed working in big global organization, and then like the specific problems around logistics, supporting and scaling small businesses that I kind of obtained in the last chapter of my career. And so it's been a perfect fit for me. I love working here. really it kind of brings together lots of those different things that I've been passionate about through my career.
I like that you've neatly packaged that up with those three.
It was neater than I thought it would be.
I appreciate that. I'd love to know, Rebecca, what it is that you're learning about now. What is it that you're exploring currently?
Learning a lot about the hospitality industry. So, I think I know a fair amount around how small businesses as a whole tick, but there's a lot to learn in hospitality. And I love talking with business owners, talking with consumers, listening to shows such as this or reading up to really learn about what makes this industry tick and makes it unique and what are the problems and opportunities within the industry so that I can think about like what we should do next to really help it scale. We've got some amazing products and services that solve the things that we know about now, but like what's on the horizon, what are the things that are worrying people, all the opportunities that people are seeing that if we were to solve them at scale would be like easier for all of those businesses to, maximize their outcomes. So at the moment, a lot of my learning is actually about the industry, and I do that by conversations with people who work in restaurants through more research and learning from my colleagues who also obviously do some of the similar things. So that's kind of one. The other piece for me is working in technology. There's just like so much to learn on the kind of tech side. And so the last couple of years being at DoorDash, like that's been personally like great learning for me in terms of ways of working, ways of scaling tech products, all of those things. And then the third one for me is really incumbent on all of us who lead businesses. And it's around what employees or teams want and need to do their best work going forward. And I think this is something that businesses of all sizes and leaders need to think about. Now, it's not just coming out of COVID, but I think COVID and the last couple of years has really led us all to reassess what happiness is for us all. And so thinking through like, how do I create a work environment that's engaging and motivating for all of our team moving forward? So that's probably the next area that I'm sort of leaning into from a leadership perspective and learning around what does flexibility look like moving forward, or how do people want to work? What does being tied to a purpose of a business really mean to somebody in a business of our like size and scale? And like, what is it that's attracting people to work with us? How do we create those environments that people can really grow in? And it's quite different to how it was even just 5 years ago to what I think people are looking for now.
The questions that you've just presented that you're asking yourself in the first few subjects, we've been going over those sorts of things. So it's just like taking me back to class. But I'd love to just ask a little bit more around those trends and those learnings that you're taking from those trends. I'd love to hear just a bit more on that because I'm interested in obviously what DoorDash is doing and where you're planning to go and what it is that you can share with us. But I'd love to just ask a bit more about those trends and innovations because it is something that we do cover on the program, and listeners will know over the last 5 or so years that we've been running the program, there's dramatic changes that have taken place. So if you could please just tell us a bit more about what you've seen and then what you expect to be coming through.
The kind of trends and problems that we've been focused on solving, there's a couple of different arenas. I always, when I'm talking to restaurants around what they might want to do with DoorDash, kind of say, well, let's get to like, what is the problem that you're looking to solve? So I'm seeing a number of things. So there's a group of businesses, restaurants and other small businesses, where the problem they're looking to solve is like to create demand and differentiation for their business. So that's more of a marketing problem or marketing opportunity. And so building out services and products that help with that. And obviously our marketplace is one of those products, but also, how can we help at scale to bring more customers to each of these businesses? So I think a lot of businesses are now kind of looking at like they've been less in front of customers than they might have been previously. Their best skills may or may not be in marketing and attracting customers. And so like, what can we do to help them with that? And that's both in terms of on the digital side and through things like the marketplace, but also, other things that we can do that can help to create loyalty and to bring customers to them. So that's kind of like one problem area that I kind of hear a lot from businesses is kind of like, how do I rebuild or build that customer experience, customer loyalty, and get my brand in front of enough people? The other one, so then there's other businesses that sort of say, well, I don't have a problem with that, but like, how do I fulfill this demand? And so this might be, businesses who are thinking about their own customer engagement channels. So, an ordering app or a website, an ordering storefront, or engaging customers who've come into their restaurant, but then keeping them engaged. And, so we're sort of looking at how we platformize a lot of the things that we do as a business so that businesses can do that for themselves, helping them to build a website or an app so that their customers can order directly with them if that's what they want to do, allowing them to tap into our driver network and our delivery capability if they already have enough demand and they don't need us to drive demand, helping them to advertise more effectively if that's what they want. So this is more where people feel like I've got demand and I don't want to turn off that demand that I've now built with a whole different customer segment to those who are interacting with me in my restaurant, but I don't necessarily have the capability to do that myself. And that can be staffing issues with having their own drivers, or it can be just quite frankly that they don't want to deal with all the logistics and somebody else might be able to do that better. The other arena is really probably more kind of forward thinking, and it's a bit around, it's not just kitchens like we were talking about before, but it's almost like, what do the new ways need to be that people can operate to be more efficient, but also to meet different consumer demands? And so at a macro trend, like if I zoom out of hospitality and just look at like consumer trends, this drive to convenience, I think is something that's not going to go away. I think that that's something that we've become quite accustomed to over the last few years. And to be honest, in my experience in e-commerce, Australia was quite behind comparable markets in things like online shopping up until COVID. And so we've had a bit of an acceleration there. And so how do we help businesses to tap into that? And so e-commerce deliveries, reaching new customers, helping customers who interact in one vertical or one type of business to interact in another. An example, people often ask me about why we're bringing non-restaurant partners onto the DoorDash marketplace. So, we have grocery, we have convenience, we have liquor, we have pets products, we're building out lots of different verticals. And it's like, well, imagine if you're a restaurant owner and there's a customer who buys grocery 3 or 4 times a week and they didn't used to want to do food delivery, but they now come to DoorDash to do their grocery shopping. And then they're going to discover your brand and obviously that's a whole ecosystem that works both ways, because what we're here to do is to provide those consumers with the convenience that they're looking for. And then they'll want that convenience across different kind of verticals. So seeing that kind of consumer trend around convenience, I think offers a lot of opportunities to small businesses across all those different lines and in restaurants in particular, where we're able to bring them new demand.
And consumers who are on the pulse with it, and business people too who are in an adjacent space, will know that we've seen those sorts of things starting to occur with your competitors as well, building that sort of framework for delivery. It's interesting because it's blurring many different industries into this one mishmash of all sorts of different things, right? You've got logistics, there's operations, there's manufacturing, all these supply chains are just kind of from different verticals and industries are coming together into one. So it's really interesting to see, and I'm not directly in it, but it's, very fascinating to watch. So interesting to see how DoorDash is adapting. I'd like to ask you on that then, what you believe should be receiving attention in that space that isn't receiving it.
In those areas that I've outlined, I would say this piece around how people want to work is probably the biggest opportunity for all of us who operate in this big ecosystem. As you call it mishmash, I call it an ecosystem that we operate in. I think it is this piece around like how people want to work. So I think every industry is facing this challenge of resourcing, right? And having enough people who can work in each of our businesses. This is something that it's getting a lot of attention on an individual basis. So I don't think you talk to any business leader who's not thinking about how to retain their team or how to grow their team or putting in place great benefits for their team. That's businesses of all sizes across all industries. But I think that maybe we haven't really kind of zoomed out as an overall society to kind of look at, well, what is it that's really changed? Because I don't think that just higher salaries or a few more days off a year is probably addressing the major things that might have changed, which is this idea of like the place that you work, the hours that people want to work, the blending of home life and work life. We were almost like forced into some of those things, and we don't want to give those things up. And so how that works in different industries is different. I'm not sure that really we're addressing it's not even the root cause. I kind of look at it as the root opportunity that's here around what people want to give to their work and how they want to do that. And I think it's fairly fundamentally different to what it used to be.
Rebecca, you mentioned coming from a creative background was sort of the foundation of your career there in advertising. I'd like to know then what really your creative process is and how it is that you develop those ideas, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in product development, but how you go through those steps internally and then execute them.
So I'm probably less process driven and more, I guess, organic in how I kind of come up with creative solutions to problems. It's more around like taking in a lot of information. So hearing of a problem, reading some articles, looking at some trends, and then thinking about how can I bring capability that my organization has or that I have or that a team has or a partnership that we could build to solve this problem better than what's currently happening. And so the way I sort of go about that is to get really clear on what the problem is that we're looking to solve first up. If you want to get like technical about it, like have a problem statement that we're looking to solve. An example of this could be, how do consumers in Australia want to pay for things in a way that's kind of streamlined and so that a company like DoorDash can just fit into their everyday life? That was a problem that we were looking to solve in terms of like, how do we differentiate ourselves, but also how do we just become really relevant to the Australian consumer when DoorDash landed here in Australia, a number of years after our competitors. And we are obviously a challenger in this market. And so then thinking about, well, what is the easiest and like best way for us to solve this problem that we have? Because there'll always be like multiple ways that you could solve that problem. But what's going to be like the fastest, the most effective, and also a way that sort of differentiates and, creates something special. If I was to take that problem of like, how do we embed ourselves in the everyday lives of Australian consumers, that led me to say, well, how do consumers in Australia want to pay? How do we just become another service that a consumer's using? Thinking that through and going, well, we could build an amazing payments business. We could create a credit system. There were lots of different things. Or we can just look to build a partnership. And so in this case, we partnered with Afterpay. And what that gave us was actually bringing together what we do best and what they do best, and like bringing that to market in a way that is really relevant to the Australian consumer and just becoming part of the Australian consumer's everyday life because it's something they already do. Then, that kind of goes through to like how you would make that happen, how you bring that to life in a way that's really relevant, and how you get benefit for everybody, all partners and the consumers and merchants involved. And so for me, it's kind of, if I think of that creative process, it's like find a problem and define it really well of what it is that you want to solve. And then honestly, like all ideas are great ideas. So kind of like put them all on the table and like look at what's going to be fast. So, doing something quickly and, making it sort of happen. What's going to be really relevant and what's going to drive an outcome that is better for everybody who's involved. The reason I use the Afterpay partnership, which doesn't sound like the most creative thing I ever could have come up with, is because another solution that might have been like more innovative and creative on paper could be, well, we're going to build a payment system. We're going to have everything integrated into DoorDash and we're going to kind of own that. It puts up a lot more barriers to others and so forth. But it would have taken us a really long time and it would have been like less relevant to the consumer, even though it may have been on paper better for DoorDash. And so it's also being creative, but leaving your ego at the door and doing the thing that solves the problem best in the fastest way and benefits the most, I guess, parties. In advertising, that creativity, I guess, is more of the stereotype of creativity, where you see a great ad or you hear a great piece of content. But when you kind of apply that creativity to business, for me, it's around being unconstrained. So making sure you have like the time and space to be unconstrained in your thinking and giving that time and space to your team, and then starting to really narrow in on the right solution and going and executing on it.
Thank you very much for elaborating on your creative process there, Rebecca. I'd love to know what your biggest challenge is right now. It's not just what's your greatest challenge. I'm looking for something that is really providing you with friction that you're working through. It could be something that you're looking to change, even as large as something sociological. So I'd love to know what it is that you're facing at the moment.
There's two, and I mean, I've spoken about one of them, which is around creating the right environment for a team that can really thrive. That's probably more sociological, to be honest. And that's probably, as a business leader, the main thing that I'm kind of focused on, because that is the viability of our business in terms of having the right people in our team engaged, enthused, and wanting to be at DoorDash. That's probably the biggest problem that I personally in my role am looking to solve and work on. But then if I think about the business problems, it's really around like, what does this next evolution of growth for the small businesses that we serve look like? So how are they going to come out of the last couple of years of quite a lot of turmoil, where really we've taken actions with those businesses that has been very much like in the moment to help them survive and do as well as they can through difficult times, to now, well, what are those trends and opportunities that are going to stay? And how do we kind of embed them with our partners? And so working on what does a more stable environment look like? And then the next innovations would be the other piece.
I'd love to continue asking more questions about these sorts of things for you, Rebecca, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to wrap it up with the last question on the show today for you. Who would you like to hear on the show?
I'd love to hear some small business owners. So I'd love to hear local restaurateurs and hear more from them around the challenges that they've faced and the opportunities that they're seeing, and hear more of their small business stories.
There's another program we've got called Quarantini, which has covered a lot of the effects of COVID on hospitality, events and tourism. So there may be some episodes out of there that you'd enjoy, and they're really short and sharp. But thank you very much for joining me on the program today, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure having you on and hearing your insights, your personal journey, your career, and what DoorDash is doing. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This program is hosted by James Henderson. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.